The blood on Helena Graham's dress had dried to a rust-brown stain by the time she stumbled into Dodge City, Kansas, and she knew exactly what every man in that dusty frontier town would think when they saw her. It was 1878, and women like her saloon girls who'd worked the gambling halls and entertained miners with whiskey-soaked songs were considered little more than property, something to be used and discarded when the novelty wore thin. She'd fled Silver Creek in the dead of night after Garrett Monroe, the man who'd claimed to love her, had beaten a prospector nearly to death for touching her arm, then turned his fists on her when she tried to stop him. The irony wasn't lost on Helena that he'd nearly killed a man for doing exactly what he himself did every night, treating her like she was something he owned. Her boots kicked up small clouds of dust as she walked down Front Street, past the Long Branch Saloon where piano music tinkled through the evening air. Men turned to stare, their eyes traveling from her tangled dark hair to the torn fabric at her shoulder, lingering on the bruise that darkened her cheekbone. She could practically hear their thoughts, see the calculations behind their gazes. A woman alone, clearly running from something, desperate. Easy pickings. Helena kept her chin up despite the exhaustion that made her bones ache. She'd walked for 2 days straight, sleeping in a dried-up creek bed and drinking from muddy water holes. Her throat was raw with thirst, her lips cracked and bleeding. She needed work, needed shelter, but she knew what kind of offers she'd receive. It had been the same in every town she'd ever been in. Men only wanted one thing from a woman like her, and she was so tired of it she could weep. The general store was still open, light spilling from its windows onto the wooden sidewalk. Helena pushed through the door, making the bell jingle. The proprietor, a round-faced man with spectacles, looked up from his ledger and his expression immediately shuttered closed. "We don't extend credit," he said flatly before she could even speak. "I wasn't asking for any," Helena replied, her voice hoarse. "I'm looking for work, any kind of honest work." The man's eyes flicked over her appearance, taking in every damning detail. "Try the lady gay. They're always looking for girls." "I said honest work." "That's what I'm offering, lady." Now if you're not buying anything, the door opened behind her, bringing with it the smell of leather and horses. Helena stepped aside automatically, years of making herself small and unobtrusive kicking in. The man who entered was tall, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore a dusty hat, chaps over worn denim pants, and a bandana around his neck. A working cowboy, by the looks of him, probably just in from a cattle drive. "Evening, Xander," the proprietor said, his tone considerably warmer. "What can I do for you?" "Need some supplies, Mr. Peterson. Flour, coffee, beans. Enough for 2 weeks." The cowboy's voice was deep and measured with a slight Texas drawl. He set a list on the counter, then his eyes landed on Helena. She saw him take in her appearance, but unlike every other man she'd encountered, his expression didn't fill with calculation or lust. Instead, concern flickered across his features. "Madam, are you all right?" Helena straightened her spine. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine. You look like you could use some water." Without waiting for her response, he turned to Peterson. "Get her some water, would you?" "Now see here, Xander, I'm not running a charity, I'm paying for it." Xander Flint pulled some coins from his pocket and set them on the counter with a definitive clink. "Water, and whatever she needs." Peterson grumbled but fetched a dipper of water from the barrel. Helena's pride warred with her desperate thirst. Thirst won. She drank deeply, trying not to gulp it down like an animal, though she wanted to. When she lowered the dipper, Xander was watching her with those steady brown eyes. "Thank you," she managed. "When's the last time you ate?" "I don't need charity." "Didn't say you did. I asked when you last ate." Helena's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, her cheeks flushed. Yesterday morning. Xander turned back to Peterson. Add some jerky and hardtack to my order, and a canteen of water. He looked at Helena again. You running from something, she could have lied, should have lied. But there was something about the directness in his gaze that demanded honesty. Someone. He nodded slowly, as if she'd confirmed something he already suspected. You got somewhere to stay tonight. I'll figure something out. There's a boarding house run by Mrs. Carmichael on 3rd Street. She's a decent woman, takes in ladies who need a safe place. Tell her Xander Flint sent you. She'll give you a room for tonight at least. I don't have money for a room. Didn't ask if you did. He collected his supplies as Peterson bagged them, then handed Helena the jerky, hardtack, and canteen. Mrs. Carmichael's husband was killed by Kiowa raiders 5 years back. She understands what it's like when the world's not kind to you. Go on now. 3rd Street, white house with blue shutters. Helena stared at the food in her hands, then up at this strange cowboy who was helping her without asking for anything in return. Her eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. Why are you doing this? Because you need help. He said it as if it were the simplest thing in the world. That's reason enough. He tipped his hat to her and walked out, leaving Helena standing in the general store with her mouth slightly open. Peterson was watching her with an expression that suggested he thought she'd lost her mind if she didn't take Xander up on his offer. He's a good man, that one, Peterson said grudgingly. Works for the Double F Ranch. If he says Mrs. Carmichael will help you, she will. Helena found the boarding house exactly where Xander had said it would be. Mrs. Carmichael was a sturdy woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. When Helena mentioned Xander's name, the woman's face softened. That boy, she said with obvious affection. Always finding strays to help. Come in, dear. You look half dead on your feet. The room was small but clean with a real bed and fresh linens. Mrs. Carmichael brought up a basin of warm water and a cloth, along with some salve for Helena's cuts and bruises. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry, just offered quiet kindness that made Helena's throat tight with emotion. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in months, Helena ate the jerky and hardtack Xander had given her and wondered what kind of man helped a woman without expecting anything in return. In her experience, that kind of man didn't exist. Men took what they wanted and justified it however they could. Garrett had told her he loved her even as he'd controlled every aspect of her life. The mine owner in Silver Creek had offered her protection in exchange for warming his bed. The saloon keeper before that had promised her a percentage of the take and then pocketed most of her earnings, but Xander Flint had asked for nothing, expected nothing. The novelty of it kept her awake long into the night. She saw him again 3 days later. Mrs. Carmichael had extended Helena's stay after she'd helped around the boarding house, cleaning rooms and cooking meals to earn her keep. Helena was hanging laundry in the backyard when she heard Mrs. Carmichael call her name. Xander stood in the kitchen, hat in his hands, looking somehow larger in the confined space. His hair was damp like he'd recently bathed, and he smelled of soap and sunshine. "Miss Graham," he said politely, "I hope you're settling in all right." "I am, thank you, and it's Helena. Xander." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger. He couldn't have been more than 26 or 27. "Mrs. Carmichael mentioned you might be looking for work." Helena glanced at the older woman, who was suddenly very interested in the pot of stew on the stove. "I am. The Double F is looking for a cook. Our last one quit to get married and move back east. It's hard work cooking for 20 ranch hands 3 times a day, but it pays $30 a month plus room and board. You'd have your own cabin on the property. $30 a month." Helena had never made more than 15, and that was when she'd been singing in the saloon. "I can cook," she said carefully, "but I have to ask, why are you offering this to me?" "Because we need a cook and you need work." Seems straightforward enough. Most men wouldn't offer a woman like me that kind of opportunity. Xander's expression shifted, something hardening in his eyes. "And what kind of woman is that exactly?" "You know what I am. What I was. You can see it in how I'm dressed, the places I've been. I see a woman who's had a hard time of it and deserves a chance at something better." His voice was firm. "I don't care what you did before you came to Dodge City. I care whether you can cook decent meals and show up on time. Can you do that?" Helena felt something crack open in her chest, some defensive wall she'd built years ago. "Yes, I can do that." "Then the job's yours if you want it. We can ride out to the ranch tomorrow morning. I'll come by at dawn with a horse for you." He was true to his word. The next morning, as the sun painted the eastern sky pink and gold, Xander arrived with 2 horses. He'd brought Helena a split riding skirt that Mrs. Carmichael must have loaned her, along with a proper hat to shield her face from the sun. The ride to the Double F took about an hour, through rolling prairie grass that rippled like water in the breeze. Xander pointed out landmarks as they rode a distinctive rock formation, a creek that ran year-round, the place where he'd once seen a herd of buffalo that stretched to the horizon. He talked easily, without the expectation that Helena would fill every silence, which she appreciated. She was too busy taking in the vast openness of the landscape, the endless sky that made her feel both insignificant and strangely free. The Double F Ranch was larger than she'd expected, with a main house, a bunkhouse, several barns, and various outbuildings. Xander led her to a small cabin set slightly apart from the others, near the cookhouse. "This would be yours," he said as he dismounted and helped her down. His hands on her waist were firm but brief, nothing lingering or suggestive about the touch. "It's not much, but it's private." The cabin had a bed, a small stove, a table with 2 chairs, and a window that looked out toward the prairie. It was more than Helena had dared hope for. "It's perfect." "Good. Let me introduce you to Mr. Franklin, the ranch owner." Theodore Franklin was a weathered man in his 60s with a white beard and sharp blue eyes. He looked Helena over with an assessing gaze that made her spine stiffen, but his words were fair enough. "Xander says you can cook. I'll give you a week's trial. If the men don't complain about the food and you keep the cookhouse clean, the job's yours permanent. We eat breakfast at 5, lunch at noon, supper at 6. You'll have help from Tommy, he's our ranch hand who does odd jobs. Any questions?" "No, sir." "Then welcome to the Double F, Miss Graham." The first week was brutal. Helena woke before dawn to get the fires going and breakfast started. She cooked mountains of flapjacks, fried endless pounds of bacon and salt pork, made enormous pots of beans and stew, baked countless loaves of bread. Her feet ached, her back ached, her hands were covered in small burns and cuts. But she kept at it, determined to prove herself. The ranch hands were initially suspicious of her, a woman with her obvious past, thrust into their midst. But Helena had learned long ago how to deflect unwanted attention with sharp words and a sharper glare. When one of the younger cowboys, a kid named Billy, made a crude suggestion her second day, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "Try that again, and you'll find your coffee tastes remarkably like horse piss." The other men had laughed, and Billy had turned red and mumbled an apology. After that, they treated her with cautious respect. Xander, she noticed, always thanked her for the meals, always asked if she needed anything, always made a point to compliment something she'd cooked: the tenderness of the beef, the fluffiness of the biscuits, the way she'd seasoned the beans. At first, Helena had waited for the other shoe to drop, for him to show up at her cabin door with expectations written on his face. But he never did. He was just kind, consistently, persistently kind. It confused her more than cruelty ever had. One evening, about 3 weeks into her time at the ranch, Helena was washing dishes after supper when Xander came into the cookhouse. Most of the other men had already headed to the bunkhouse or were out checking the livestock. "Need any help?" he asked. "I can manage." "I know you can. But I'm asking if you'd like help anyway." Helena looked at him, this cowboy who kept defying every expectation she had about men. "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "Treat me like I'm worth something." Xander was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "My mother was a saloon girl in Austin," he said finally. "She fell on hard times after my father died, did what she had to do to survive, to keep me fed and clothed. Men treated her like garbage, like she was less than human because of how she made her living. I was just a kid, but I remember how much it hurt her, how she'd come home and cry where she thought I couldn't hear." He picked up a dish towel and started drying the plates Helena had washed. "When I was 15, she got sick. Consumption. None of the respectable doctors in town would treat her because of what she was. She died in a charity hospital, alone except for me." His voice was steady, but Helena could hear the old pain beneath it. "I swore after that I'd never treat someone poorly just because of how they made their living. My mother was a good woman who did what she had to do in a world that didn't give her many choices. I figure most women in her situation are the same." Helena's eyes blurred with tears. "I'm sorry about your mother, me too." He gave her a small smile. "But she taught me something important before she died. She said the measure of a person isn't what they've done to survive. It's how they treat others when they have the power to be cruel or kind. So that's what I try to do, choose kindness when I can. Most people don't think like that." "No, they don't, but that doesn't make it wrong." They finished the dishes in companionable silence. When they were done, Xander walked Helena back to her cabin, keeping a respectful distance between them. At her door, he tipped his hat. "Good night, Helena. Sleep well." "Good night, Xander." She watched him walk away, his long stride covering the ground easily, and felt something shift inside her. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. The seasons changed. Summer gave way to fall, the prairie grass turning golden and the air gaining a crisp edge in the mornings. Helena settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She learned the preferences of each ranch hand who liked their coffee strong enough to strip paint, who couldn't stomach onions, who had a sweet tooth that required extra dessert. She learned the work of the ranch too, understanding now why the men ate such enormous meals. They worked from sunup to sundown, mending fences, breaking horses, moving cattle, doing the endless labor that kept the Double F running. And through it all, Xander was there. Not hovering, not demanding her attention, just present. He fixed the latch on her cabin door when it started to stick. He brought her wildflowers once, a handful of purple prairie blooms, and said simply, "Thought you might like these." He taught her to ride better, taking her out on Sunday afternoons when the work was lighter, showing her how to read the land and the sky. They talked during those rides. Really talked. Xander told her about growing up in Texas, about working his first cattle drive at 16, about the time he'd gotten lost in a dust storm and thought he'd die before finding his way back. Helena found herself opening up too, sharing things she'd never told anyone. About growing up in an orphanage in St. Louis, about the matron who'd been cruel, about her first job singing in a saloon at 17 and how proud she'd been to make her own money. "I thought it would be different," she admitted one afternoon as they sat by a creek, their horses grazing nearby. "I thought if I just worked hard enough, was good enough, I could make a respectable life. But it didn't matter what I did. Once men knew I'd worked in saloons, I was ruined in their eyes. You're not ruined, Xander said quietly. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. How can you say that? You barely know me. I know you walked 2 days through dangerous territory to escape a bad situation. I know you've worked yourself to exhaustion every day for months to prove yourself. I know you're kind to Tommy even though he breaks more dishes than he washes, and you always save extra biscuits for old Pete because his teeth hurt. I know enough. Helena looked at him, this cowboy who saw her in a way no one else ever had. Men only want one thing from a woman like me, Xander. I learned that a long time ago. Then those men were fools. He met her gaze steadily. You want to know what I want from you? Her heart hammered in her chest. What? I want to see you smile more. I want you to feel safe here. I want you to know that you're valued for who you are, not what anyone can take from you. He paused, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. And if I'm being completely honest, I want the chance to court you properly, to take you to church socials and town dances, to sit on your porch in the evening and talk about our days, to build something real with you if you'll let me. Helena's breath caught. You want to court me? I have for months now, but I didn't want to rush you or make you uncomfortable. You've been through enough without me pushing my feelings on you. Your feelings, she repeated faintly. I'm in love with you, Helena. He said it simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I think I've been since that first night in Peterson's store, when you stood there so proud despite everything. But I know you might not feel the same way, and that's all right. I just wanted you to know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with what those other men wanted. I love you because you're brave and stubborn and kind. Because you make the best biscuits I've ever tasted, and you laugh at Tommy's terrible jokes even though they're not funny. Because when you look at the sunset, your whole face lights up. Because you're you, and that's more than enough. Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks. I don't know how to do this, how to trust this. We'll figure it out together. Xander reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and gently wiped her tears with his thumb. I'm not going anywhere, Helena, and I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to keep showing up every single day until you believe that you deserve to be loved the way I love you. What if I'm already falling in love with you too? The words slipped out before she could stop them. What if I'm terrified because I don't know how to do this without waiting for it to turn bad? Then we take it slow, one day at a time, and I'll prove to you every single day that not all men are like the ones who hurt you. Helena leaned into his touch, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have something good. Something real. Their courtship was the talk of the ranch within days. The men had seen the way Xander looked at Helena, the way she'd started smiling more when he was around. Most of them approved Xander was well-liked, and Helena had won them over with her cooking and her no-nonsense attitude. But there were whispers, too, from some of the neighboring ranches when word got out. Whispers about Helena's past, about what kind of woman she was. Xander shut those whispers down hard. When a cowboy from the neighboring Circle K made a crude comment about Helena at the saloon in town, Xander had broken the man's nose and told him in no uncertain terms that if he heard one more word against Helena's name, he'd do worse. Helena had been mortified when she heard about it, worried that Xander had damaged his reputation defending her. But he'd just taken her hands and said, "Let me make this clear. You are the woman I love. Anyone who disrespects you disrespects me. I'm not going to stand by and let that happen." "You could have any woman in town," Helena said. "Someone respectable, someone without a past. I don't want any woman, I want you." He pulled her close, and she let herself lean into his strength. "Your past is part of what made you who you are, Helena. I wouldn't change it because then you wouldn't be the woman I fell in love with. Do you understand that? She was starting to. Slowly, day by day, Xander was proving that he meant every word he said. He took her to church socials, ignoring the scandalized looks from some of the town ladies. He introduced her to everyone as his sweetheart with obvious pride. When the preacher's wife made a pointed comment about Helena's unsuitability, Xander had calmly suggested that perhaps the good woman should reread the Bible's passages about casting first stones, then steered Helena away before she could respond. I wanted to slap her, Helena admitted as they walked home. I know. But you didn't, which makes you a better person than me because I wanted to slap her too, and I generally try to avoid hitting women. Helena laughed, the sound startling her. When had laughter become easy again? Winter came to the prairie, bringing with it bitter cold and occasional snow. The work at the ranch continued, just harder now. The men had to break ice on water troughs, check cattle for frostbite, keep the animals fed when snow covered the grass. Helena's cookhouse became the warm heart of the ranch, a place where frozen cowboys could thaw out over hot coffee and warm stew. Xander came by every evening after the supper dishes were done. They'd sit in her cabin, in front of the small stove, and talk. Sometimes he'd read to her from the newspapers he picked up in town. Sometimes they'd just sit in comfortable silence, Helena mending clothes while Xander cleaned his tack or sharpened his knife. It was domestic and peaceful, and Helena treasured every moment. He'd kissed her for the first time in November, after she'd come out to watch the first real snowfall. She'd been standing on her porch, her face turned up to the sky, catching snowflakes on her tongue like a child. When she'd looked down, Xander had been watching her with such tenderness in his eyes that her breath caught. "Can I kiss you?" he'd asked. Yes. He'd kissed her softly, sweetly, his cold lips warming against hers. There was no demand in it, no expectation of more. Just affection and love and promise. When they'd pulled apart, Helena had touched her fingers to her lips in wonder. "That was my first real kiss," she said. Xander had looked surprised. "Really, men have kissed me before, but never like that, never like it meant something." He'd kissed her again then, deeper this time, and Helena had felt it all the way to her toes. This was what it was supposed to feel like, she realized. This warmth, this connection, this sense of being cherished. Christmas came, and with it a surprise. Mr. Franklin called everyone to the main house on Christmas Eve for a celebration. There was food and drink, and someone had brought a fiddle. The men danced and sang, and when Xander asked Helena to dance, she said yes. He held her close as they swayed to the music, his hand firm on her waist, their other hands clasped together. "I have something for you," he said quietly. "Xander, you didn't have to, I wanted to." He led her out to the porch where it was quieter. From his pocket, he pulled a small box. Inside was a simple gold band with a tiny sapphire. Helena's heart stopped. "What is this?" "It's a promise." "And a question." Xander took the ring from the box and held it carefully. "I know we've only been courting a few months. I know you might want more time. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Helena Graham. I want to marry you, build a home with you, have children with you if you want them. I want to grow old watching sunsets from our porch. I want to prove to you every single day for the rest of our lives that you are loved, valued, and cherished." Tears streamed down Helena's face. "I'm scared. I know, but I'm asking you to be scared with me, to take this leap and trust that I'll catch you. Will you marry me, Helena?" Every self-protective instinct Helena had developed over the years screamed at her to say no, to run, to not trust this. But louder than all of that was a voice that sounded like hope, a voice that said maybe this was real. Maybe this man really did love her the way he claimed. Maybe she deserved happiness after all. "Yes," she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you." Xander's face split into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her and she kissed him back, and it felt like coming home. They were married in the spring, on a warm April day when the prairie was covered in wildflowers. Mrs. Carmichael stood up with Helena, and Mr. Franklin walked her down the aisle. Most of the town turned out, curiosity bringing even those who'd previously looked down their noses at Helena. But she didn't care about them. She only had eyes for Xander, standing at the altar in his best suit, his face shining with love and joy. The preacher performed the ceremony, his words washing over Helena like a benediction. When Xander slipped the wedding band onto her finger, his hand was steady and sure. "I take you, Helena Graham, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said clearly. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. Through good times and hard times, in sickness and health, I will stand beside you. You are my heart, my home, and my everything." Helena's voice shook as she repeated her own vows, but she meant every word. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed her thoroughly, and the small church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and enough food to feed half of Dodge City. The ranch hands had decorated the area with wildflowers and paper lanterns, and someone had brought a piano out from town. There was dancing and laughter, and Helena felt like her heart might burst with happiness. "Happy?" Xander asked as they danced together under the stars. "So happy I don't have words for it." "Good. That's how I want you to feel every day." "You've already proven that," Helena said softly. "Every single day since we met, you've shown me what real love looks like. You've proven wrong everything I thought I knew about men and relationships. You've given me a life I never thought I could have." "We've given each other that," Xander corrected. "You've made me happier than I knew was possible, Helena. You're my partner, my equal, my best friend. I'm the luckiest man alive." They'd moved into a small house on the ranch property, one that Mr. Franklin had helped them build over the winter. It had 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a porch that overlooked the prairie. Helena had never lived somewhere that was truly hers before, and she loved every inch of it. She continued cooking for the ranch hands. She genuinely enjoyed the work, and the money was good, but now she had help. Mr. Franklin had hired 2 women from town to assist her, and they'd become friends. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Helena would wake early to start breakfast, spend the day cooking and managing the cookhouse, then come home to Xander in the evenings. They'd have dinner together, talk about their days, make love in their own bed in their own home, and fall asleep wrapped in each other's arms. It was so ordinary, so beautifully normal, that sometimes Helena had to pinch herself to believe it was real. The first time they made love, Xander had been so gentle, so patient, taking his time to make sure she felt safe and cherished. He'd kissed every inch of her skin, whispered how beautiful she was, how much he loved her. When she tensed up, old memories trying to intrude, he'd stopped immediately. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he'd said. I want this with you. I'm just scared." "I know." He'd kissed her forehead. "We'll go slow, and if you want to stop at any time, we stop. No questions, no pressure. This is about us together, nothing else." His patience and understanding had helped Helena relax, and when they'd finally come together, it had been everything she'd never known it could be. Tender and passionate, loving and real. Afterwards, as they lay tangled together, Xander had held her close and told her again how much he loved her. And Helena had cried not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming relief of finally understanding what intimacy was supposed to be. Their first year of marriage was full of adjustments and discoveries. They learned each other's habits and quirks, had their first real argument about something ridiculous that Helena couldn't even remember later, learned how to apologize and compromise. Through it all, Xander kept his promise. He proved every single day that he loved her for who she was, not what he could get from her. When Helena discovered she was pregnant the following spring, she was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Xander was just thrilled, sweeping her up in his arms and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We're going to be parents." "Are you ready for that?" Helena asked. "With you, I'm ready for anything." The pregnancy was difficult. Helena was sick for the first 4 months, barely able to keep anything down. Xander took over more of the cooking duties, somehow managing to work the ranch and care for her. He brought her crackers in bed, held her hair when she was sick, rubbed her swollen feet in the evenings. He talked to her belly, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch and the horses and all the things they'd do together as a family. "I love you so much," Helena told him one night as he carefully rubbed lotion on her stretched belly. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." "You don't have to deserve love, Helena. You just have to accept it." Their son was born in January of 1880, during a snowstorm that left them snowed in for 3 days. The doctor couldn't make it out to the ranch, so Mrs. Carmichael and 2 of the ranch wives served as midwives. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Helena thought she might die. But Xander was there through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her how strong she was, how proud he was of her. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Helena sobbed with relief and joy. Xander cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He's beautiful," he whispered. "You're amazing. I love you so much." They named him James Theodore Flint after Xander's father and Mr. Franklin. Baby James had Xander's eyes and Helena's dark hair, and from his first day, he was the absolute center of their world. Watching Xander with their son made Helena fall in love with him all over again. He was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with James when he was fussy, singing to him in a surprisingly good baritone. He approached fatherhood the same way he approached everything, with patience, dedication, and love. "You're a natural at this," Helena said one evening as she watched Xander rock James to sleep. "I'm making it up as I go, same as you. You're good at making it up then." Their family grew over the years. 2 years after James came Mary Grace, a tiny girl with her father's smile and her mother's determination. Then came William, called Will, who was born during a spring thunderstorm and seemed to have inherited the weather's energy. 3 children in 6 years made for a chaotic, exhausting, beautiful life. The ranch prospered too. Mr. Franklin, getting older and without children of his own, made Xander a partner in the Double F. Together with Helena's smart financial management, she'd learned to be careful with money during her lean years. They built the ranch into one of the most successful in Kansas. But success didn't change who they were. Xander still fixed fence posts and broke horses. Helena still cooked, though now she supervised a kitchen staff rather than doing it all herself. They still took walks in the evening when they could, still talked about everything and nothing, still made each other laugh. One evening when James was 7, Mary Grace was 5, and Will was 3, the family sat on their porch watching the sunset. The children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Xander had his arm around Helena, and she leaned into him, content. "Do you remember that first night?" Helena asked. "When you gave me water in Peterson's store, of course, best night of my life. Because you met me. Because I knew even then that you were going to change everything." He kissed the top of her head. I was right, too. I told you men only wanted one thing from a woman like me, and I proved you wrong. Every single day, Helena agreed softly. For 11 years now, you've proven me wrong. You've shown me what love really is, what partnership is. You've given me a family, a home, a life I never dreamed I could have. We gave each other that, Xander said, echoing his words from their wedding day. I'm not the hero of this story, Helena. We saved each other. She turned to kiss him, this cowboy who'd seen past what she'd been forced to be and loved the woman underneath. This man who'd kept his promise, day after day, year after year, to cherish her and prove that she deserved everything good the world had to offer. Mama, Papa, come see. James called from the yard. We'll caught a toad. They laughed and went to inspect the toad, which turned out to be a very disgruntled frog. The children were delighted, asking a million questions about where frogs lived and what they ate and could they keep it as a pet. We should let it go back to the creek, Xander said gently. That's his home. Can we visit him? Mary Grace asked. Anytime you want, sweetheart. They walked as a family down to the creek in the fading light, the children running ahead while Xander and Helena followed hand in hand. When we'll release the frog and it hopped away into the reeds, the children cheered like they'd accomplished something magnificent. Walking back to the house, James suddenly asked, Papa, how did you and Mama meet? Helena and Xander exchanged a glance. They discussed how to answer this question when it eventually came up. They decided on a version of the truth simplified, age-appropriate, but honest in its essence. Your mama came to Dodge City looking for a fresh start, Xander said. She'd had a hard time of things and she needed help. So I helped her. Why? Mary Grace asked. Because that's what you do when someone needs help. You don't ask what they can give you in return. You just help. And then we fell in love, Helena added. Your papa showed me every day that I was worth loving, even when I didn't believe it myself. Of course you're worth loving, Mama, James said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. You're the best. Helena's eyes filled with tears. Her children would grow up knowing they were loved, knowing their worth, never doubting that they deserved good things. It was a gift she'd given them by choosing to trust Xander all those years ago, by choosing to believe in love despite everything that had tried to teach her otherwise. That night, after the children were tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Helena and Xander sat on their porch in the rocking chairs they'd bought for their 5th anniversary. The prairie stretched out before them, silvered by moonlight. You ever regret it? Helena asked. Marrying me. All the gossip and judgment you had to deal with. Not for one single second. Xander reached over and took her hand. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena Flint. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be the best version of myself. Any man who judged me for loving you wasn't worth my time anyway. I love you, Helena said. More than I have words for. I love you too. Always have, always will. They sat together in comfortable silence, the way couples who have been together for years can do. Helena thought about how far she'd come from that desperate, bruised woman who'd stumbled into Dodge City believing she'd never deserve more than scraps of affection. Xander had proven her wrong about that. He'd proven that men could be kind, faithful, loving, and true. He'd shown her that she was worthy of respect, of partnership, of a love that lifted her up rather than tearing her down. And he'd done it the only way that mattered, not with grand gestures or empty promises, but with consistent, daily actions. By showing up. By keeping his word. By loving her through her doubts and fears. By being, every single day, the man he'd promised to be. As the years continued to pass, their love only deepened. When the children grew older, James became a skilled horseman who eventually took over much of the ranch operations. Mary Grace inherited her mother's business sense and helped manage the ranch's finances. Will, the youngest, showed an unexpected talent for breeding horses and started a successful breeding program that brought in additional income. Mr. Franklin passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1889, leaving the Double F entirely to Xander and Helena. They ran it with the same values he'd instilled in them: fairness, hard work, and treating everyone with respect regardless of their background. Helena became known throughout the region not just as an excellent cook, but as a woman who helped other women in difficult situations. She never forgot what it was like to be desperate and alone. When women showed up at the ranch looking for work and a fresh start, Helena hired them if she could, helped them find positions elsewhere if she couldn't. She set up a fund to help women escape bad situations, funded partly by the ranch's profits and partly by donations from other sympathetic folks. Xander supported all of it, proud of his wife's compassion and determination to help others. Together, they created a small legacy beyond their family, a network of support for women who needed it. Their children grew and eventually married, bringing grandchildren into Helena and Xander's life. James married a schoolteacher from town, a smart woman named Caroline who fit right into the family. Mary Grace fell in love with a banker's son who appreciated her sharp mind and business acumen. Will married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, uniting two successful operations. By the time Helena and Xander were in their 50s, they had 8 grandchildren running around the ranch, filling it with noise and laughter and joy. They'd built not just a successful business but a true family legacy. One evening in the summer of 1895, Xander and Helena celebrated their 20th anniversary. Their children had organized a party, inviting everyone from the ranch and half of Dodge City. There was food and music and dancing, just like at their wedding. 20 years, Helena marveled as they danced together, their movements still in sync after all this time. It doesn't feel that long. Best 20 years of my life, Xander said. He'd aged well, with silver threading through his hair and laugh lines crinkling around his eyes. To Helena, he'd never looked more handsome. Here's to 20 more. At least, Helena agreed. They got those 20 years and more. As they aged, they slowed down, eventually handing over the day-to-day operations of the ranch to James while they enjoyed a well-earned rest. They spent their days doing the things they loved, riding across the prairie they'd both come to love, playing with their grandchildren, sitting on their porch and watching the sunsets. Helena never forgot where she'd come from. Sometimes, late at night, she'd wake from dreams of her old life of Garrett's fists, of the desperate fear she'd felt fleeing Silver Creek, of the bone-deep certainty that she'd never deserve better. But then she'd feel Xander's arm around her, hear his steady breathing, and remember that she'd survived all of it. More than survived, she'd built a beautiful life on the other side of all that pain. "You still prove me wrong, you know," she told Xander one evening as they sat together on their porch. They were both in their 70s now, their hair white, their movements slower but still steady. "About what?" "About what men want from women like me. Every single day you still prove me wrong." Xander smiled and took her hand, his grip still strong. "That's because I love you, Helena. I've loved you from the moment I met you, and I'll love you until my last breath. That's not ever going to change." "I know," Helena said softly. And she did know. After more than 4 decades together, she knew it in her bones. "I love you too. Thank you for saving me." "Thank you for letting me," Xander replied. "Thank you for being brave enough to trust me, for giving me the gift of your love, for building this life with me." They sat together as the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Their grandchildren's laughter echoed from somewhere nearby, and the warm breeze carried the scent of summer grass. It was peaceful and perfect, this life they'd built together. Helena Graham, once a saloon girl who'd believed no man would ever love her for anything more than what he could take, had found a love that proved her wrong in the best possible way. And Xander Flint, the cowboy who'd seen past her circumstances to the woman underneath, had found his soulmate. They lived out their years in happiness and peace, surrounded by family and love. When Xander passed away quietly in his sleep at the age of 78, Helena held his hand and whispered that she'd see him soon. She followed him just 6 months later, the two of them buried side by side on a hill overlooking the prairie they'd both loved. Their legacy lived on in their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, in the ranch that still bore the Double F name. In the fund, Helena had established that continued helping women for generations. But most of all, their legacy lived on in the story. They'd left behind a story of a woman who'd been broken by life, and a man who'd helped her heal. Not through grand gestures, but through the simple act of showing up, every single day, with consistent love and respect. It was a story that proved that redemption was possible. That past mistakes didn't have to define your future. That love, real love, wasn't about what you could take from someone, but what you could give. And that sometimes, when you least expected it, the right person came along at exactly the right time to show you that you'd always been worthy of everything good the world had to offer. Xander had proven Helena wrong about men, about love, about her own worth. He'd done it every single day of their life together. And in doing so, he'd given her and their entire family a gift more precious than gold. The knowledge that true, selfless, enduring love really did exist. Their story became legend in Dodge City, passed down through generations. The tale of the saloon girl and the cowboy who'd loved her, not despite her past, but as part of the whole, complex, beautiful person she was. It was a love story for the ages, set against the wild backdrop of the American frontier. And it proved that sometimes the best love stories were the ones built not on passion alone but on respect, patience, and the daily choice to honor and cherish the person you'd chosen to spend your life with. And so their story ended not with tragedy or regret, but with the quiet satisfaction of lives well lived and love well earned. They'd proven that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, where survival often trumped sentiment, real love could not only exist but flourish. They'd built something lasting, something true, something that echoed long after they were gone. Their great-great-grandchildren would eventually run the ranch, still bearing the Flint name, still telling the story of Helena and Xander with pride. The cookhouse where Helena had worked was preserved as a museum of sorts, a testament to her journey from desperate refugee to beloved matriarch. The small cabin where Xander had courted her still stood, maintained by the family as a reminder of where their story had truly begun. Because in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the hardships they'd overcome or the judgments they'd faced, but the love they'd built together. The family they'd raised, the lives they'd touched. The proof, lived out over more than 40 years, that Helena had been wrong when she'd said men only wanted one thing from a woman like her. Xander had wanted everything: her heart, her mind, her soul, her partnership, and he'd given her everything in return. Every single day.